Hey everybody, it's John here at Bipbopboom, and I'm not going to do a metal video, so there's not going to be any metal records, or very few in this video. So I'm just going to talk about the best sounding rock records I own, or best sounding records I own, and hot stampers, or whatever you call hot pressings, and Robert Ludwig pressings, Bob Ludwig. And I went record shopping yesterday, got a lot of records, but no metal. But I did pick up this record, and this is Robert Calvert from Hawkwind in the background, and this is Nectar, British band from Germany, prog rock, art rock. This is their fifth record, I believe, 74. But I'm not really showing, I shouldn't show the record so much, but it's a little bit engineered by Dieter Dierks from the Scorpions and krautrock stuff. But I put this on, and I saw Robert Calvert was guesting on this, and I heard it. It just sounded really good, this record. And I noticed it said mastered by Robert Ludwig, and then I checked. And Robert Ludwig was like a genius at mastering records. After they were recorded, and produced, and mixed, he would get the master tapes, and basically EQ, set the levels, and make the stampers that vinyl was pressed on. And he was great at making a fantastic sounding stamper, which made fantastic sounding vinyl. And the earlier the pressing on the stamper, the better. And I don't know all the technical stuff, but I do know some records sound better than others. And if it has an RL on it, the odds are it's going to sound better than something else. But the way you tell Robert Ludwig record is on the dead wax between the label and the grooves. There'll be a little writing, and you'll see to say Sterling, which was the mastering place, and it'll have a little RL next to it, or Master Disc, where he was at later, and I'll have a little RL. So basically I'm going to show some RLs and some good sounding records, and maybe you could look through your collection and you might find you have some RLs and not realize you're sitting on a really good sounding record. And let's see, Robert Ludwig is most famous for doing the original Led Zeppelin 2, which the originals sound fantastic, and I unfortunately don't have one, probably never will, but it sounded so good that the bass was popping so much it made the needles skip out of the cheap turntables. You probably all know the story, but all subsequent Zeppelin 2s, I don't know about like reissues now, but it was all off like a cassette version of his mastering with the volume turned down and the grooves squished together. So they never sounded as good as the original pressings of Zeppelin 2. But, where am I going with this? Oh yeah, I'm not an audiophile. I don't have the best equipment in the world. I have a decent system. And enjoyment of music is not about the rare pressings you have, or, how the fidelity, or the Japanese version, or whatever. It's about enjoying the music. And I had more fun enjoying music off of like a cheap cassette mix in my old crummy car speakers when I was a kid than I would in like a $300 record. But I'm just pointing out some stuff and just to check your collection. But Robert Ludwig, I got some records here. I'm going to start with the most important to me is the original pressing of Back in Black with the RL on the inner grooves, and it sounds so darn good. It's just amazing. The bass, and what RL did is, if you picture music like as a canvas on your speakers and you can see the canvas, he made things pop. The sounds actually pop. The hi-hats up here, the bass drum popping out, and he's known for a big bass and a round sounding bass, not like the hip-hop car. It's just a loud bass. But just, he'd be able to EQ it and make it come alive out of that canvas, at least most of the time. And that's what a hot stamper record will do, is it'll pop out and just be EQ'd. And the more you turn up a record, the better it sounds. But when something's EQ'd right, the more you turn it up, it sounds better tenfold. But the original Back in Black, this is the only way to hear what AC/DC wanted it to sound like, because all the subsequent reissues, and especially the CDs, and the more modern the reissue of the CD, the crappier it sounds. And what you hear on the radio or satellite radio or at your friend's house is not Back in Black. If I hear it, it just doesn't sound like this record. And I mean, there's no way of hearing AC/DC unless there's some new version that goes back the old way than to hear the original, which just kicks my ass every time. And this is basically the only AC/DC record I put on. It's, you know, I'm a Bon Scott guy, but just when I want to hear something loud and sound fantastic and knock me off the seat, it would be this record. And I know Steve, the Harmless Rebel, if you look at his old videos, he did something about the noise wars, talking about CDs, how they kept compressing it, and the older CDs sound better, there's more air and space, and he goes into that, and that was a really interesting video. But it's hard to get these records anymore mastered and sounding the way they were supposed to sound. But let me go through some other RL records I have that maybe you have too, so you might want to just check for kicks. Great sounding record for those about to rock. Great, it sounds great. Who Made Who sounds really good. Who Made Who sounds good, and it's actually got You Shook Me All Night Long on here, and it sounds really good, but it's still not as good as that original Back in Black. Bob Ludwig did the original 74 Jailbreak. I just put it on today. It sounds fantastic. He also did Fly on the Wall. Sounds good, but like the 80s production, you know, it's mastered fantastic, but it's still limited by what they give him. It's a great record, Fly on the Wall, don't get me wrong. Here's some other good ones. This is Joan Jett album from 1983. It's not a great Joan Jett record. It's got Everyday People and maybe Fake Friends was a minor hit, I remember, or at least. But there's really nothing on here. But the record sounds great, like really sounds great cranked up in the room. And the songs aren't that strong. And actually, like the record, I realized Joan Jett isn't a great singer. I love her. She's a great character, a great front man. You know, she does a lot of covers, but she's still a pretty good songwriter. But you realize she's not really a great singer. But what a good sounding record. I have a original Alive. And I know this original is from my cousins who bought it, and then I ended up getting it when I was a little kid. But this is RL, Robert Ludwig, and it still sounds like Kiss Alive. It doesn't pop. It's not like a mind-blowing experience, but it's good to have that one. Also with this one, Slade. It says import, but it's not an import. Slade Alive, one of the early Slades. Good sounding record. The bass comes through, but it's early Slade. It's live, and it's not the best example, but it's cool that it was Robert Ludwig mastered. This is a good sounding record, the first Dust record, which is like 71, and it was featured Marky Ramone, and it's a good 70s kind of desert rock record. Other good RLs I have, and you may have laying around, everyone could find copies of Cry of Love. This one's mastered by him, good sounding record, great sounding record. This is maybe one of the gems of my collection. I know a lot of people who do the VC metal stuff have this record. Check if it's the RL. Maybe they all sound good. I have nothing to AB it with. But man, oh man, oh man. When I put on Johnny the Fox meets Jimmy the Weed and crank it up because it's funky, it's got some air in there, so you could really hear the band pop. And the bass is just huge playing through, and it sounds so good. And then you put another record on after it, and it's just like lower, and it pales in comparison. But what a great sounding record. This Bowie record, not a good Bowie record. Matter of fact, this is the latest Bowie record I have, 1984, Tonight. I have every record before, besides I think I'm missing Scary Monsters. But just the sound of it for that 80s sound, it sounds really good. Tonight, the song Tonight's good. Yeah, it's just sounds good. I'll try to go quick. Cactus Restrictions was this their second record maybe. Carmine Apiece, Tim Bogart on bass, Jim McCarty on guitar. 1971. This sounds fantastic, especially I think I remember Evil, the Howlin' Wolf cover is great. And I got some Kinks records, and these sound really good mastered. The Kinks, a little trebly, a little nasally, a lot of piano and ballady stuff, so the mastering doesn't shine through, but it's still cool to have these. It's Preservation Act 1, Soap Opera, Give the people what they want. Schoolboy in Disguise. Word of Mouth, which sounded exceptionally good because this is more of an 80s. I think it's Do It Again was their big hit. It might have been their last hit, actually. But this sounds good because it's got more of an 80s rock like production, and it's colorful, and it bounces more of a traditional record. What's this? Sleepwalker. And I had this down in the basement with like my crappy records, but I pulled it out because everyone always talks about it. And this is an RL. I was lucky to have it. I listened to this record. I couldn't get through the whole thing, but it just sounds great. But I hate this band. But I mean, for what they're doing, I mean, this is considered like a great record to test stereo systems. But you get it. Maybe you have one laying around and you can hear it. Accept Balls from the Walls. I got an RL copy, which is fantastic. This is just a fantastic record. Production, playing, songwriting, performance. But RL, you can't really hear so much on a heavy metal record because it's just like that wall of sound. So you don't have a lot of space to work with, but it's fantastic sounding record nonetheless. This one I just pulled out. I didn't realize this. I had Jim Carroll. I had this, for many years. And I like the songs and all. I didn't realize how good a sounding of a record this is. It just sounds really well done. And it's probably like a no-name producer too, but it just really pops. Produced by Earl McGrath. I'm not familiar with him. And that was, 1980, Jim Carroll, the Basketball Diaries dude. Great copy, original copy of Tattoo You. Sounds fantastic. And it's an RL. So anyone who has Tattoo You, just take a check. And this is another surprise. This is a sleeper. This is a terrible Stones record. Dirty Work, or terrible to me. But I bought this when it came out, so I know it's original. It's got the red shrink wrap. It's like the regular colors under the red shrink wrap. But this is an RL one, and I put this on, and it sounds fantastic coming through. It's only like, was it Back Too Rude, Harlem Shuffle, and there's one hit to the body. What was it? Dirty Work. I can't remember. I didn't really have much songs off this. It's not a great Stones record, but just for the sonics and to hear it, great sounding record. That's it for my RLs that I know of. I'm sure I have more. Maybe like next year, 2 years from now, I'll discover I have another and dig it. But I'm going to pull out some like hot stampers. Either I have a hot stamper or a really well mastered, well produced record. And if you want to redig yours out, sometimes you might have a gem and not realize it. And you don't have to have a great version of the record to make it sound good. You crank up anything, it sounds good. But my In Rock sounds especially good, and it kicks ass. As is my Machine Head. These are both early. I don't know if they're first pressed. It's a thick vinyl, and it's got like that original lyric sheet. I guess I could check the matrix numbers, but what was I going to say? They sound great. This is my original copy of Perfect Strangers. Sounds fantastic, cranked up. Perfect Strangers, especially that middle part where they go into the weird cashmere-ness of it. But then I put on like Fireball, which is a great sounding record, and Who Do We Think We Are? And they just pale in comparison to those other ones. So it makes a difference. This is probably the best sounding blues record. Blues isn't the best genre. Some Muddy Waters, some Howlin' Wolf sounds good, but a lot of it's in independent studios, mono, older sounding, primitive sounding. This is a little more early 60s, I think, which is a little past. I don't like going past the 50s with blues, but this record, unbelievable. It sounds like the band's in the house. And it's Junior Wells, I think Buddy Guy's on guitar, and every track on this record, and I think this is a 70s pressing, is Delmark Hoodoo Man Blues. Like, if you just want to get a blues record just to sample, to play some kick-ass Chicago blues, it just sounds real. This is the record to get. Original copy of Sticky Fingers, or at least an early 70s pressing. It's like only very good condition. There's some static on it, but it plays through. It's in good condition, but it sounds so good, especially like Can You Hear Me Knocking and Bitch, and it's the one with the zipper. And then they compare it to like my 80s copy I got in the late 80s, and it still sounds good, but it doesn't compare to that. And I also have like a CD. I had it on CD in the late 80s too. And this is where you could do an A-B for someone to say, man, the vinyl sounds better than the CD. And it's clear as day. You can just flick it back and forth. And this is a great sounding record. I broke my code not to buy any Triumph, but I got this a few months ago. And it's the first maybe American record, Rock and Roll Machine. And I'll flip the record. And this is on a cool old Passport, the Nectar, Bellophone, but the old Passport. Yeah, more Robert Calvert. But anyway, what was I saying? But another thing here. Here's another myth about the 180 gram vinyl and the 200 gram vinyl. You know, if it was a bad, sometimes they're not. These reissues sometimes aren't off the masters, or they weren't mastered or EQ'd right. But this Triumph record sounds so good, and it's on old RCA Attic 76, 77. But look at this. It's one of these thin records. So I don't believe that the weight of the record, I mean, you want the record to sit on the turntable. You can always put a weight on. I have a weight I sometimes use. But the thickness of a record is a myth, because none of my 200 gram, or I mean, some of them sound good, but most of them do not sound as good as this Flexi one. And I know I got some Bowies that are thin like this that sound great, and most of my Kinks are on those Dynaflex, and they still sound good. So the thickness of the vinyl, I think it's just a way to get more money and make it seem like it's better. But that's just my opinion. Another great sounding record. This isn't original, but it's still early, mid-70s press of Ziggy Stardust. Sounds fantastic. I showed this before, maybe the best sounding record in my collection. Sinatra, Strangers in the Night. And I think this was a California press, which sounds different than a New York press, to get into the nerd stuff. But if you have one of these, you can find one of these. Woo! Not a great Dylan record. It's like the 80s. Actually, I kind of like it. But it's produced, it's like overproduced 80s style, but the harmonica really comes out in front, and it just sounds like a world of noise and instruments and stuff. And produced by Daniel Lanois. But I think Mark Knopfler had something to do with it. This is from like 89. I don't recommend it as a Dylan record unless you're a fan, but it's such a great sounding, just to demonstrate a stereo. Here's another one. You get the Phase 4 stereo great demonstration records. You see them in the thrift stores. This one's particularly good because it's all rock songs. Light My Fire, In the Year 2525 is really good. It's like big band version with horn section, pianos, like maybe 20 instruments just coming at you in stereo. Honky Tonk Woman, Whitest Shade of Pale, Get Back, Nights in White Satin was a good one. Cool. And these were all, this is London, it was America, but they were all done in England at the Phase 4 stereo. 101 Jazz, I know, but man, this record knocks it out. Like, it just sounds live. Some other ones, I'm just going to go quick. We're at 18 minutes, maybe I'll finish under 20. Just in case you have them laying around, or if you get them cheap. Coliseum 2, featuring Gary Moore, Neil Murray, and Don Airey, and some other cat. Mike Starrs on vocals and John Heisman on drums. This is like a proggy musician, fusion-y record, but it's got a crazy keyboard, so it goes highs and lows, and it's kind of like the hard rock Steely Dan, and it's a fun record to listen to. It's definitely not my bag at all, but I enjoyed hearing the sonics of it. Original pressing of London Calling. Man, oh man, one of the best sounding records I own. This, if someone came over to my house and you wanted just to hear a good record, put on side 3, Wrong and Boyo, Death of Glory. This record is amazing, amazing. And consider I'm not the biggest Clash fan anymore. I kind of got bored of them when I was younger. But this record, just because it sounds so good, will still go on. Here's another one, kind of like Back in Black. This is a good one. This, I love rock and roll. This is the only way you can hear it. You hear it nowadays. It's got distorted guitars, like compressed guitars, so they sound like heavy metal guitars. And it just doesn't sound like it does on the record, which really breathes. you hear it on the radio and then you hear this, or you hear a CD version, completely different. And this is the way I remember it. You really hear that guitar solo, like, and it's separated from everything. This is a newer band, Don Cavelli, French guy. I know I showed this for something, but just a stellar sounding blues kind of. He's got some distorted guitars and weird vocals, but it pops alive more so than any other record. Original Cars record. This is a hot stamper. I don't know if they all sound as good as this, or just all the originals sound this good, but man oh man, you hear the hand claps, and this one really pops. And yes, we're over 20 minutes though. Bad record. It's a later Thomas Dolby, but man oh man, that bass, one of the craziest like round bass sounds. Just if you happen to see this in a junk shop, I don't recommend it. I think it's probably like 88, so it's way past Thomas Dolby's prime, but it's got the weird keyboards and just enough to keep it interesting sonically. I know Robert Ludwig mastered this. This is not mastered by him, at least it doesn't say so. But Brian Ferry, Bete Noir, great record. Sounds fantastic. A little echoey on his vocals, like a Susie and the Banshees, but just a wonderful listening experience. I don't want to get into mono, because I got a lot of great sounding mono stuff, and that's a whole different bag, playing it on like the tube receiver and just mono stuff, rock and roll, just kick spot, rhythm and blues. But just to do this them, I got it in one of those thrift stores. It's a mono version of Here Comes the Night, and Here Comes the Night, that song sounds unbelievable in mono, and that guitar sounds so wide, that riff. Great sounding record. I'll pop that on to demonstrate mono sound. This is one of the best sounding records, the Guelo, especially Cheap Sunglasses. I can't tell you how it sounds like I'm in one of those old-fashioned stores that used to have the car stereos or the stereo equipment, and you're in the carpeted room with the door shut. It sounds so good, and it's just I paid $3.50 for the Guelo. Original. I think it's original. It's got the hard inner and stuff on Warner Brothers. Great sounding record. I showed this before. Trigger. This is a promo copy, so it's early on the presses. Fantastic power pop, hard rock, Kiss-ish, Stars, Cheap Trick. Just great record. If you see this around, sounds fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and I absolutely more and more in love with this record every day. It's so good. And then there's the new record I picked up not that long ago, this Kiss Unplugged. Sounds so good, especially Nothing to Lose with the band. I hear 3 acoustic guitars separately, all the background vocals, and it pops out and it sounds like I'm in front of the stage. And Got to Choose is great. The whole record sounds good. That Domino song's good. But man, Nothing to Lose is phenomenal. But what a great sounding record. This is not even on the Kiss label. This is like MTV put this out, I think. MTV on Universal. But anyway, those are just some of my great sounding records, and maybe you have them too, or maybe you have some and you might want to check if you have an RL, and then you could play that record and play it next to another record, and you'll see the difference. But cheers. Hope you learned, and it's about the enjoyment of the music, not what pressings you have and all that, because what I showed you here, I mean, 99% of the stuff I have maybe lo-fi and crummy versions or badly produced bands, but that's just as much fun. But hope you learned something. Take care.